Welcome to Coffee and Baseball, Baseball and Coffee, episode 39.
And off we go.
That's right. As you can hear, I'm a little bit under the weather, so I'm taking Aaron's place this week. In this episode, we are going to cover all the deadline deals, or as many as we can in an hour. Give our reaction both real baseball and fantasy baseball wise as to the impact of each of these trades. Aaron, what's up? How you doing?
Doing all right. First day back at work, so day one of the work week.
Right on,
so ready to talk some baseball with you and then get some rest to try to knock out day number 2.
Sweet. Coffee stories. What you got going
on? Well, I really missed my coffee alternative this morning. I really have had my work I've had time off, and then I was out with a illness and dealing with some family illness, and so I haven't really been working much the last 2-3 weeks, and the kids have been home. So I'm kind of getting back into my solo work routine, and I really had gotten hooked on. It was a cacao base, and we've talked about it. I shared it with you. It's like a cacao based herbal coffee alternative, and I really missed it this morning. It by no means replaces coffee, but it just had like a nice mouthfeel and like that chocolatey richness of just subbing for coffee. I'm out, and I missed it this morning a lot. I was like, man, I missed that. So I'm gonna track some more down. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it a lot.
Awesome. I'm on the Central American train again. Made some of the Guatemala Los Volcanes, which is just a very straightforward Guatemala from Walla Walla Roastery, but really nice. I haven't had a really nice clean cup of coffee in a few days now, and I think I'm going to try it as a pour over tomorrow if I can. Yeah, it's my comfort zone. You know, it's kind of my predictable, comfortable place to have a nice city roast Central American coffee in the morning as my way to wake up. So cheers to you, Walla Walla Roastery. Appreciate it. All right, brother. Trades. It's crazy. A lot went down over the last couple of days. I think we need to start with the Soto trade. It was just because it's being billed as potentially the biggest trade that's ever happened in Major League Baseball. The trade was, for those who have been sleeping under a rock for the last 36 hours, JUAN Soto and Josh Bell went from the Washington Nationals for Luke Voit, Robert Hassel III, CJ Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, Harleen Susana, and James Wood. Abrams, Gore, Susana, and Wood are all incredibly high potential young players. Voit was in there for salary filler for the most part. What was your first reaction to the trade, Aaron?
I was skeptical how much weight the actual, trade rumors had. So I think I'm just getting past the initial just shock and acceptance that they actually did trade him, because I really didn't think that it was a realistic possibility that a team would trade this level of talent, because I knew that it would take this level of talent to convince them to trade him, but I didn't think anyone would meet the price. So that was my initial reaction. Just while it actually happened, someone actually stepped up and made them an offer compelling enough that they actually did it, because I never really took it seriously until it happened.
It's interesting that you see it that way. I think I did expect him to get traded, and I understand where you're coming from, but it seemed to be a relationship that, while it wasn't a bad relationship, he clearly, if they're offering $440 million and he's saying no, he's not going to be there in 3 years. I also think that their ownership situation, or the team being up for sale potentially, does change the calculus of trading a player of Soto's talent and age. And that may have been a part of it. And then you actually add AJ Preller and his guts. I don't know. I expected him to be traded, and maybe it was just me buying into the media hype, but I did expect him to be traded. And I guess if you're that talented and you're walking, 20% of the time because they won't pitch to anyone else in the lineup, that's got to be frustrating, and you've got to be at least wanting to look elsewhere. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I never doubted the Nationals being serious about shopping him. I just doubted anyone would meet their price. It didn't seem that was the part that I got stuck on.
uh-huh. What about so what about the trade was, or what about the price that the Padres paid is higher than other trades that we've seen for you?
Well, I think it's. I mean, prospect rankings are prospect rankings. I take them with a grain of salt, but I mean, 5 of their top 6. Mackenzie Gore was a former #1 overall, has big league experience, and just started to show maybe he's going to fulfill that. Although he has an injury right now, you'd like to hope the Nationals did their diligence on his medicals to make sure that that came back clean.
Right.
But I mean, you got a potential, center fielder, 2 up the middle defenders in Abrams and Hassel. The value that those bring. Wood and Susanna, I didn't know a lot about. I did some research after this trade to learn more about them. Sounds like Wood is a kind of a pop-up this year, but they're both really young and really far away. And I think, people kind of are just throwing in Bell, but he's a really good hitter as well, and I think a big upgrade for them. Being a switch hitter and then being able to actually remove Hosmer. I think they've tried, half a dozen times the last 3 years, but they finally moved Hosmer and they also moved Voigt. So first base is Bell's and he's a switch hitter. So I think that's also a user upgrade for them. Gives them some versatility in a lineup. And I think for 2022, I don't think that's getting enough attention, the upgrade that they're getting there, just to lengthen their lineup. And then they also signed Brandon Drury, which, we mentioned him on the last pod. You had said, Cincinnati should sell, and get what they can. And they followed that train of thought. But he's having a really good year and he can play second, third, and DH. So whether he's giving Manny a blow or Bell goes to DH and Cronenworth goes to first and Drury plays second, he gives them some nice versatility and lengthens their lineup as well. And he's having a career year. So I think that was another kind of under the radar move for them, just because everything pales in comparison to Soto. But they've really lengthened their lineup from Soto down.
They did. So yeah, Wood has an 877 OPS, and I think he is the 4th highest OPS at first base, I believe, in the major leagues, something like that. So yeah, I think a very underrated portion of the trade for sure, and something that people aren't talking about enough. James Wood was on the radar for a lot of folks, I think, because he wasn't ranked in the top 5 coming into the season, but I think part of it was actually the depth of Padres system and not a reflection on Wood. He's 6'7", 240, but he's a really good athlete. I see him as like, he's got that like defensive end sort of like sleek defensive end sort of build, but he was a 2nd round pick in 21 and did hit really well in rookie ball. He hit 372, granted in 86 at bats, but he hit 372, 465, 535, and then continued to do the same this year. So he's a first base corner outfield prospect, but he may actually have the highest upside of any of the 3 offensive players that were traded, outside of Voigt, obviously, because he's a veteran. I love Hassel. I think Hassel, for me, I know Abrams has, that 50 steal potential and a bit of power and is a very good defensive shortstop, but Hassel for me was the one that I would have been most reluctant to give up. Susana is 18-year-old pitching prospect. I'll know he could get hurt, but he's throwing 100 plus already and was a high bonus signee for the Padres. And I'm not a huge lover of Gore. I get that, he does have that top of the rotation potential, and I certainly would take him in a trade. But Hassel was the one for me. Hassel and Wood were the 2 players that I would be loath to give up if I was the Padres. And I think they're the 2 for me that make the deal or that price that you spoke of so incredibly high, because Hassel's a 300 hitter who could be 25 consistently. You're looking at a 10-time All-Star. I don't know if he's an MVP candidate, but you're looking at a 10-time All-Star in center field who could be a 300 hitter throughout. So interestingly, I just brought up the Nationals' new prospect ranking on MLB Pipeline, and it goes Hassel at 1, Cavalli, Brady House, James Wood, Cole Henry, and then down at 8 is Susana. So they got 3 of their top 8 prospects in this trade, plus CJ Abrams and Mackenzie Gore. So yeah, quite a haul. I'll be interested to see. I assume that Abrams, from a fantasy perspective, Abrams gets full-time at-bats from the get-go. You know, Gore obviously is inserted into the rotation. I don't know. I'm not a lover of Voigt's skill set, so I don't know that it changes his value for me at all. He may get more playing time. And then Susana is going to be a while. Hassel, you may push his arrival time a little bit. You might see him, I think, at the beginning of 23 as opposed to kind of end of 23 with the Padres, just because, you know, they really have nothing in the outfield, the Nationals. But crazy trade. I was sitting here watching MLB Network when the trade went down, and I was pretty shocked when I saw it. So lots of fun.
So if you real quick, so
Yeah.
from a fantasy dynasty perspective, if you rostered any of these prospects, would you be indifferent, excited, or disappointed in them changing orgs at this stage in their development?
I think for the hitters, it's a positive just because of playing time.
Okay.
I think all of the hitters get their time frames pushed up a little bit because they're not playing for a contender anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, even Wood, right? Wood might not be until 24, 25, but they're going to want to see him play. And I think that he may not have been brought up in the Padres organization as quickly because they'd be in contention. Obviously, Abrams was blocked a bit by Tatis in the middle infield, and so he to me is a pure shortstop. I know we talked about second base and center field for him, but he's a pure shortstop to me. So seeing him get regular time at short is huge. And then Hassel, again, I think it moves him up maybe a half a year or so. So I don't see a huge difference in terms of development of prospects between the two. I know the Padres have done, you know, I think the Padres have had some big hits, but also some big misses as far as prospects go. And the Nationals, you can't knock them for developing Soto and, you know, Turner for the most part and some other players. So no, I don't see a difference in organization I just see a difference in time frame. Pitching wise, I don't know. I don't know that I trust the Nationals yet with pitching. We'll see, but I also don't know if I love Gore's overall kind of prospect profile. And Susana is at least 2-3 years away.
Yeah, quite a difference from going. I think to me, I think he's the one I would markedly downgrade, going from the NL West to the NL East, being a left-handed pitcher, you know, facing the Braves, the Mets. You know, it's I think that's a bit of a downtick for his stock. In addition to the health concerns, you know, anytime a young pitcher has arm injury, it just gives me pause. But
right. The other, we should also mention the big players in this trade. I think Soto sees more pitches to hit in a lineup surrounded by Machado and Tatis and Bell. So we may see his walk rate tick down slightly, but we'll see obviously his production go way up, I would assume. Same for Bell. I think Bell will probably hit 4th, I'm assuming. And
did you work out a lineup? Because I did.
The important portion of it, yes, I did. The bottom 5, I did not. I assume it'll go when Tatis is healthy. I assume it'll go Tatis, Soto, Machado, Bell, and or you may see Machado and Soto switch, but I assume Soto hits 2nd. And so if you're Bell, you know, and you're looking at a full season and everyone's semi-healthy, he's looking at 120 RBIs, right? I think Bell stock just went way up as well. Maybe we should mention the Josh Hader trade as well, just because we're talking about the Padres, unless you have anything else to talk about with Soto.
I don't. My lineup is similar but slightly different. I had Profar, Soto, Manny 3rd, Tatis cleanup, Bell 5th, Cronenworth 2nd, DH Drury, catcher Alfaro, and Kim at short. My hot take there.
Keep dreaming. Keep dreaming.
My hot take there is that Kim plays short and that Tatis plays center. Right now, Kim is a plus 8.5 WAR defender, and that's short. I think with that starting pitching staff, the level of defense up the middle that he provides is pretty remarkable. So I know that I'm just interested because there's such a pitching first team. And if Tatis really can play center and they can take Grisham's bat out of the lineup and replace that, that's a huge upgrade to their outfield. And then you still got that nine WAR defender at shortstop.
I think Grisham is starting to hit a little bit though. And
he has his moments for sure.
And they see him as a, he's a Gold Glove center fielder. And so in my mind, excuse me, I feel like I get what you're saying. I do think Kim still gets 3 to 4 games a week, but I think they mix and match Kim, Profar, Cronenworth, and then Tatis probably plays 5 games a week when he gets back, as opposed to playing, full time. But I know they value Grisham's D in center, and I think that's something to consider. I don't think that there's a world, I may be proven wrong. I don't think there's a world where Profar hits at the top of that lineup. I know that he takes a lot of walks, but I think getting those 4 players as many at-bats as possible is going to be the priority for Bob Melvin. That's my perspective on it. So I think that they mix and match based on pitching matchups and defense, meaning, if you have a ground ball pitcher, obviously Kim might be the choice. And I also think we'll see Tatis probably soak up a bunch of DH games in the beginning as well, just to save him defensively. But yeah, anyone's guess is great. We're not in Bob Melvin's mind, but it is going to be fascinating to see. And I think that they've put themselves just in that, I think in the half slot below the Dodgers as far as the National League and a serious World Series contender, which is really, really cool to see. I like the Padres. I've always loved the Padres organization.
It's just an interesting exercise because like Grisham's a negative right now, a negative WAR defender, as is Nola. And you look and they both have the 5th and 6th most plate appearances on the team, whereas Alfaro is actually a positive defender and is hitting better. It's just interesting to see. And then you look at Hosmer was a -8 WAR at first, and Bell is positive. So, and I know he's worked really hard on his defense, to his credit.
Right. I wonder what
Musgrove had a cool quote about Bell, just saying he was one of the hardest workers he's ever been around, and he was just really excited to have him on the team.
That's awesome.
Because
I would wonder though. I would wonder what defensive metrics the teams use. Right. I would assume that they have some really in-depth defensive metrics that they use. And we can't discount the fact that I think the Major League Baseball will carry a player's reputation a little further along than we may, because we're looking at metrics from month to month or year to year. And I think they're looking at, oftentimes a player's reputation will precede them. And so a player like Grisham, if they see him as a plus defender in center, whether Fangraphs WAR says it or not, I could see them paying attention to that, maybe more so than we might. Anyways, the point is just that I think if you own some of those players that are more on the periphery and not the core 4, and they're producing, you're still looking at somewhere between 3 and 5 games per week at minimum. And if you own one, and I think an uptick in their counting stats because they're surrounded by such great hitters. And if you're an owner of one of those four core players, then you're in business, right? I think everyone is going to see their production increase. But super fascinating, super cool trade. Reminded me of when Griffey was traded to the Reds from the Mariners, but on an even greater scale, because it'd be like us trading Griffey and is at 23 and not at, close to 30. So super wild, and fascinating to see what it does for Soto as well.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the bullpen. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
No worries. So Josh Hader goes from the Brewers to the Padres for Taylor Rogers, Esteury Ruiz, Danielson Lamet, and Robert Gasser. Rogers was the closer in San Diego, but was struggling a bit. Esteury Ruiz has stolen a bajillion bases in the minor leagues this year. But there's some question about his ability to hit the ball hard and get on base. Danielson Lamet was a really pretty dominant starter a couple years ago, but has had some arm trouble and some wildness. And then Gasser was a second-round pick a couple years ago, left-handed starter, kind of back of the rotation type of pitcher at his peak. So what's your take on this trade? Interesting that the Brewers are I think on top of the NL Central and dealing their closer away for some depth.
Yeah, I mean, it's a compelling move for sure. It's not the easy move, but I think they certainly saw, their time with Hader probably coming to a close, and maybe this was their last opportunity to maybe maximize a return. They don't have a long-term center fielder. Maybe Ruiz is that answer, and then in the short term they get, Lamet, who's kind of a wild card, and then Rogers, who has a great track record of being someone who can be a leverage arm. I'm a little skeptical if he's a lockdown closer, but I think look what he did in Minnesota. His slider, when he locates it, is a plus pitch. So I'm interested to see if Counsell and the Brewers go back to more of a fluid bullpen, or if it'll be more matchup space, or if they'll give Williams run as the primary closer. But it's compelling for both sides. I think it was a good move for the Padres. They, I think, opposite of the Brewers, I think they prefer a linear path, and they prefer a locked-in closer. I mean, you look at the way that he stuck with Rogers through this slump. He obviously wants the same person in there, and I think Hader has morphed into that one-inning guy. He's not that multi-inning reliever he was when he first went to the bullpen. He is that prototypical one-inning, slam the door, swing and miss type closer. So
right. He doesn't want to pitch more than an inning either.
No.
I think Milwaukee, from my take, is that Milwaukee, as kind of advanced thinking as they are with pitching, would prefer to go by committee. My expectation is just a guess, but my expectation is they actually do go by committee and leverage situations moving forward. But in San Diego, I think that they have a ton of great arms in that bullpen, right? They've got Luis Garcia, they have Suarez, they now have Hader. They've got a couple of kind of more unknowns. Wilson, I think it is. They've got Pomerantz is on the way back, right? They've got some good arms now, but Hader being that ninth inning arm that they can count on, I think was a good move for them because Rogers was faltering. I think Lamet is a wild card. Lamet could be a multi-inning reliever off the bat if they can tweak his command and control a little bit. I have a little different take on Ruiz. I think Ruiz, his value is some of his values is versatility. I think we could see him as a 400 plate appearance type of guy that could provide a bit of a spark. I don't think he's an everyday regular necessarily. And I do think we'll see Jackson Chourio moving very quickly through the Brewers organization. So they may look for a one-year stopgap in center field, but I think Chourio is their center fielder starting in 24. So I don't know that they're worried too much about center field. Ruiz, to me, I see him as what we thought Vidal Brujan could be, or kind of in that more modern Ben Zobrist sort of role where he's filling in at second, he's filling in the outfield. If you've got a ground ball pitcher, he could fill in center, but he's really kind of a left fielder. But what I will say too is I'm not a big chemistry guy, but I do wonder about the Brewers being in first and trading away their closer for something that is obviously more long-term. And what does that do to your team chemistry and your team attitude? If you're dealing away someone who's been dominant in the past and you're bringing back more pieces and young players, it's kind of hard to explain. I know Devin Williams was pretty upset that they traded Hader away. So I do think we'll see some mixing and matching in the Brewers bullpen. I don't know if you can count on one guy for saves. It might be a saves and hold sort of situation for all of them, but I think they'll all still carry quite a bit of value.
Yeah, a couple other pitchers of interest. I think the way they're using Nick Martinez is interesting to me. And San Diego, he's really elevated. His stuff has picked up since he moved to the pen after being a starter. And then Morejon returning from surgery and kind of ramping up. They think a lot of him. And then on the Milwaukee side, I was shocked to see him trade for Trevor Rosenthal as another power arm. So not only did they add Lamet and Rogers. They also added Matt Bush from the Rangers.
Yep.
And they also added Rosenthal, who's in rehabbing right now in AAA due to multiple health concerns. So they brought in 4 arms into their pen, which is kind of staggering. So it's really going to be fascinating to see, especially once Rosenthal, if he proves to be healthy, like how they deploy all those guys.
Right. I think they're looking to, it's pretty clear to me they're looking to just shorten up the game. Right. Let's get as many power arms as we can in the bullpen, and knowing that a lot of their pitchers, they can get pitchers to get through the lineup twice. It's more difficult for them to get through it 3 times or 2.5 times even. They've got a lot of 5-inning starters. And so how do we shorten up that game? And to me, that's what it looks like they're doing pretty clearly. I was surprised to see them give up on Antoine Kelly. They gave up Antoine Kelly to get Matt Bush. They must think a lot about Bush. Kelly looked pretty dominant in the Futures game. I loved his slider from the left side. He'll be one that I'm watching in the Rangers organization to see what they do with him moving forward. I would put a star next to his name to see if they can't develop him either into a dominant reliever or kind of a high strikeout 5 and dive sort of starter. But yeah, fascinating stuff from the Brewers. Brewers are smart. I always enjoy kind of following what their line of thinking is, because they do some really interesting stuff. One of the trades that came down late in the process was Raisel Iglesias to the Braves for Jesse Chavez and Tucker Davidson. I know you had a reaction over text with Iglesias going to the Brewers. You want to go ahead and share what that reaction was?
Yeah, I mean, I know that Atlanta, their bullpen last year was just crucial to their postseason run. And I don't know if they're just trying to replicate what their formula was of adding another leverage arm to that pin. But being, they have, who's the guy for San Diego that you had in fantasy for so long?
And said for San Diego?
Yeah. And he hurt his arm. He went to Toronto.
Kirby Yates.
Kirby Yates. Yeah, they have Kirby Yates rehabbing right now. They have Kenley Jansen, who they signed to a 1-year, $15 million contract. So my immediate reaction was
Minter too was dominant.
Yeah, my immediate reaction was like, you just traded for Iglesias, who's electric, but is also only one to pitch the 9th. And you have like one of the best relievers in the last 10 years, and Kenley Jansen's on your staff. So I had a short-term response, like, why are you signing another closer? Does this mean that Jansen's not healthy, or, again, are they just trying to cut and paste what they did last year? But as I thought about it more, Jansen is just on a 1-year deal. And so, whereas Iglesias has 2 years left after this year.
Right.
So they're basically securing a closer for the next 2 years. I mean, if they can get him to buy in, and we just talked about Milwaukee and some of the chemistry issues, that they can get Raisel to buy in to being, a setup guy or something like that for this year, they could work. But I did have an immediate reaction of, how's this going to work? Because I know Raisel was very resistant to pitching anything but the 9th in Cincinnati.
Right.
But maybe it would be different with a veteran skipper and a World Series defending team.
Right. You mean the Angels?
Yes, I meant that. I meant Cincinnati. That's actually why Cincinnati traded him, because David Bell wanted to use him outside the 9th, and he got pissed off. He wanted to use him more as a leverage reliever and not always in the 9th, and he didn't want to do it.
Right.
And that was one of the reasons why the Reds moved away from him.
Sure.
At their own detriment. But yeah, that prompted him going to the Angels and then signing that extension last year.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting deal as well. I think that, we don't know. It made me question the medicals on Jansen, and I wonder if he's going to be available. I do think the Angels were just I think they're trying to offload some payroll, right? Because they carry some of those big bloated contracts. And I don't think a ton of Davidson as a pitching prospect, but I know the Angels like to collect mediocre, post prospect sort of, or prospect sort of guys. What's interesting to me is I think about the price that was paid for Iglesias in redrafts, right?
Right. Yeah.
And he was kind of that second tier closer, but people paid a premium for him. I don't know what his TGFBI or NFBC kind of average draft position was, but he's definitely pretty expensive. And so it just shows you what what you're paying for, or
Yeah.
the danger in paying a ton for a closer. Imagine if you are leading in saves in TGFBI right now, and Iglesias was like your number one closer. You don't know if he's going to even close games anymore. So
Right.
that position is so volatile, and I really do think that it's scary. That was my immediate reaction. I felt bad for whoever has him as a closer. My assumption is that Iglesias, if Jansen and Iglesias are healthy, that Jansen is the closer. That's my assumption.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, interesting trade. Angels are kind of waving the white flag, obviously, with that one. Which leads me to, if we're done with that one,
Yeah.
and we'll do one more before break, and then we'll come back. I want to discuss the Brandon Marsh to the Phillies for Logan O'Hoppe. I know that's not one that's on a lot of people's radar as a trade, but Brandon Marsh was a top, I don't know how high he got, but I'm guessing a top 20, 25 prospect, maybe a year ago.
Okay.
Power speed combo, and Angels really did give up on him and traded him for an offensive catching prospect in Logan O'Hoppe. Do you have any thoughts on the trade as far as how it impacts either team, either player, or fantasy wise?
I think your read on it's pretty good. I mean, to me, it reflects the lack of a firm direction and commitment on the Angels' part.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the silver lining to me, hopefully, is that they're going to intend to give Joe Adell more runway and commit to him instead of continuing to move him up and down. Because it wasn't, when Trout is healthy, it was a bit of a crowded outfield.
Right.
However, I mean, of those three players, Marsh is the best defender. And can play, true center field, has plus arm, plus speed. His strikeout rate is a problem. I don't know if Philly's going to be able to help him fix that or not. But yeah, I mean, he still has a lot of tools. I wasn't surprised just because I think it's hard to be surprised by the Angels. They just kind of, again, to me, they just are kind of a scatter shot. They just kind of throw stuff and see what happens,
right.
Without any real clear vision for the type of player they want, or the development that they're gonna to get him on. It
Right.
just seems like this isn't working. Let's try something else.
Right. Well, they, if you couple the fact that they have the worst living conditions for their minor league players
Mm-hmm.
with other things that they've done on the lower end of the system, not just the minor leagues, but even major leagues, right? They've invested huge in a couple of players wanting to draw in fans, and then they've gone on the cheap with everything else, including pitching. And so you've got to assume that they're not investing a ton in their minor league development or their instructors. And so you have these prospects that obviously are displaying a ton of skill and talent, but they're not able to develop them because they don't have the teachers to actually do it. I think we're seeing that big time in Marsh. We're seeing that obviously in Adell. We're seeing that to a certain extent with Detmers, right? Where there are these players with great pedigree who you could potentially be stars, and they're not panning out. I was looking at Marsh. Marsh in 18 ran a 13.6 and a 12.2% walk rate in A and high A. And then in 19, he ran an 11.4% walk rate. And his K rates were, they were mid 20s, but they weren't
Nothing like they are
obnoxiously
now.
high, right? Exactly. Yeah. And then even in 21 in AAA, in 110 plate appearances, he ran a 14.5% walk rate and a 26.4% K rate. But then he comes up to the majors and his walk rate goes in the toilet and his K rate is in the mid 30s. And so there's something in that transition where, obviously this happens to some young players, but I think my thing is the Angels are unable to help him make adjustments. It seems like the players that have been good for the Angels are players who are going to be good for anybody, meaning, right? Meaning Trout or Ohtani. They're going to be superstars in any organization, and they're not able to actually develop anybody else. So as much as I haven't loved Marsh as a prospect for whatever reason, I think that I do think that we might see him develop a little bit more in Philadelphia. I don't know that Philadelphia has that much better of a staff, but he is surrounded by some very professional hitters that I think even if maybe his peers could even help him become a better player. As far as O'Hoppe goes, O'Hoppe is again an offense first catcher. The Angels had nothing at catcher for years. And so I think that it gives them someone to kind of plug in, and maybe it's 6 years of maybe slightly above, maybe like a 105 WRC plus, 110 WRC plus at catcher for 6 years, which is great when you're carrying those other high salaries. The other part is if they do away with the with umpires and go to a robo ump, someone like O'Hoppe, who's offensive first, now becomes a much better catching prospect than he is right now. So I don't know. It's an interesting deal. I'm mostly interested in what happens to Marsh. I also think he's a good, not a great center fielder, but he becomes a very valuable center fielder in Philadelphia because it's a small field, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. It's a bit of a lottery ticket, I think, on their end, but a cool trade that I wanted to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, with Schwarber in left and Castellanos in right, I mean, if he's got a lot of ground to cover.
For sure.
But he at least gives them maybe a league average bat with some power and speed.
Right.
With that, legitimate, big league quality defense.
Right. So let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and discuss some of the other trades and the fact that Wilson Contreras was not traded during this deadline. We'll be right back. So sticking with the Phillies, they made a couple of other deals that were pretty impactful to their pitching. They did deal for Noah Syndergaard from the Angels in a separate deal. They also dealt for David Robertson from the Phillies to strengthen their bullpen. Initially, what are your reaction to those two, and how do they impact fantasy owners of both of those players?
Yeah, I think with Robertson, you're just going to have to hold and see, if you're in a saves only league. I think it's too early to decide. I think there's some level of concern that he's not going to be necessarily exclusively the closer. I think with Thor or Noah, I think it's neutral. I mean, it's a better team, but it's a tougher division. It is a division he has familiarity with in terms of the ballparks, but his level of stuff and velocity is way down compared to when he was in the East before. His stuff plus right now is hovering around 90, where his location plus is 106. So, it's definitely like more of a location type pitcher than at this point than a stuff pitcher. But overall, his pitching plus is 103.5. He does get a lot of ground balls, which is a good thing, in terms of keeping the ball in the park. But we also know the Phillies infield defense is not great.
Right.
So a little bit of a concern there. So I think overall, more chances at wins, but a little bit tougher environment in terms of competitors and run and ballpark.
Right.
But I think he's trending in the right direction. I would certainly hold. If someone is excited about him in Philly, I wouldn't be opposed to trading. I don't think he's a lockdown. Someone I would just definitely hold.
Right.
But I wouldn't sell because of this.
I agree. I think Syndergaard he's become kind of the antithesis of what his reputation was as a Met, right? So he's obviously, like we talked about, he's a ground ball pitcher. It's 45% ground balls right now. I would worry that because the Phillies defense is so atrocious and that park is so small that you might see his ratios and stats go down a little bit as far as, fantasy production, but you might see his wins go up. So it's something to pay attention to, but their outfield defense is bad, infield defense is bad. And so he's not a pitcher that I love. I think he's a back end fantasy starter, maybe like a 4 or a 5, maybe even a 6 fantasy wise. And I don't know that his value changes, as you said. It's just different statistics are going to be impacted by going to the Phillies. With Robertson, he's competing with Sir Anthony Dominguez, who I think is proven to be better in the 8th than the 9th. Brad Hand is on that team, but he's not the Brad Hand of old. And then Corey Knebel, who they signed to a pretty big free agent deal, has not produced at the level that they expected and has also been hurt. So, I agree with you. I think he's a hold right now and kind of wait and see. But I would say it's 50-50 to see Robertson. I think Robertson is the best pitcher of those 4, and it's a wait and see to see if he takes hold of that closer role. The other part of it is in situations like Philadelphia, I think that teams typically will go with the experienced closer or the guy that they feel like they can trust down the stretch. And that guy, as far as experience goes and track record goes, is Robertson. Knebel might have better stuff, but I think Robertson could be the guy. And it's not wishful thinking because I roster him in our league. I think it's, for me, that's the way that I could see it going if they all four continue to go along the same path that they've been thus far this season. But again, pay really close attention, especially if you're in a saves only league. Pay very, very close attention to what they do in the ninth.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Robertson's stuff plus is 113, and he has the most experience. I saw a couple tweets from Phillies writers with Rob Thompson. Said that he was not designated a closer. It says sounds like Seranthony Dominguez and Brad Hand will still get plenty of opportunities. Trevor Robertson will be in the mix.
Yep.
And another wrote a quote of him as saying he's mixed and matched Seranthony and Brad Hand in the 8th and 9th inning, which is expected to stay the same. David Robertson will slide in somewhere, and he can close, of course. However, I mean, it comes down to on-field performance. So it's one thing to say that in print the day of the trade, but when he goes out there and he's clearly the best pitcher you have, you're going to give him more opportunities. And I don't think that can be ruled out based on, again, his track record, his stuff, and his, the way he's performed in 2022.
I'd also add that that Hand is tough on lefties with the breaking ball, and Seranthony Dominguez is very much fastball slider, but so tough on righties. But and then Knebel's fastball curveball. But Robertson's best pitch is a cutter, right? And so Robertson actually has ran historically some reverse splits, but is tough on both sides, and he's definitely tough on righties. And so if you're thinking in terms of those four pitchers and who do you want closing, you want the guy in the ninth who's going to be able to get to not have a big platoon split. And he's the one, stuff wise, he's the one who doesn't have that big split. So there's some things working in his favor, but again, I would keep an eye on all four of those pitchers. I don't think Hand will close, but I think unless you're going against three lefties in the ninth, but I would keep an eye on the other three for sure. Let's talk about two of the big starting pitcher trades. We can start with Luis Castillo to the Mariners from the Reds for Noelvi Marte, Edwin Arroyo, Levi Stout, and Andrew Moore. This trade happened a couple of days before the deadline. It kind of kicked off the festivities, if you want to call it that. I certainly have opinions on this trade. What did you think when you saw the trade come down?
I just immediately thought what you would think about trading Marte.
Sure.
Castillo is one of my favorite pitchers to watch. The movement on his pitches is just really fun. He's a really fun watch, and when he has to go and he's super confident, and so I'm just excited to see him go to a winning team, potentially have a postseason opportunity. And he's really pitching well this year. He's changed the shape on his four seam a little bit to make it a little flatter, and he's thrived despite being in one of the toughest ballparks to pitch in the MLB. So the return, I don't know a lot about the players other than Marte and the publicity that he's gotten. James Anderson has Arroyo actually ahead of Marte at this point.
Which is, I will say right now, as a Mariners fan, is ludicrous, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, yeah, so he's 18, so he's really far away. Marte's a lot closer. I've heard Stout's name before, but I don't know a ton about him. But I know overall, just people thought this was a good return for Castillo. But if it was me, I'd prefer to have Castillo over those prospects, whether I was the Mariners or the Reds.
For sure.
I'd take the pitcher personally, and from fantasy wise as well, I would.
Right. So, and how far do you elevate Castillo based on this trade?
I thought about that because you asked me that, and I would stand by what I said. I'd move him up. I think I had him in the mid 20s. I'd move him up near the top 15 range.
So I did a write-up on Castillo coming into the year, and basically the gist was his changeup was the 73rd rated changeup run value wise in baseball last year. His four seam and his changeup were pitches that performed decently well. And his slide, and he had a down year last year. His slider was a very good pitch. He surrendered a 170 average on the slider, 257 on the four seam, and 209 on the changeup. His sinker, he surrendered a 344 batting average, 301 expected batting average, 505 slug, and a 451 X slug. So it was the seventh worst sinker in baseball by run value. And I didn't pull up his numbers this year, but I believe he's throwing his sinker a bit less, but his sinker is also impacted by the shape of his four seam, as you said. So he's changed as a pitcher. He's always had the arm, but he's changed his approach. I obviously going from Great American Ballpark to T-Mobile is going to have a huge impact on his numbers because they're really different parks as far as shape and as far as the way the ball carries. He's also going to have a much better defense behind him moving forward. So yeah, I agree with you with your assessment on Castillo. And as far as the prospects go, as I said, I couldn't disagree more. Marte is a 30 home run, a very above average but not great hit tool, and a 30 home run potential up the middle infielder. He probably will get too big to play short. Doesn't mean he can't play second. He's probably going to end up at third base. And he's made a ton of errors at short thus far. But I think Marte is one of those prospects who, is rated highly, obviously, as a 19-year-old. Started off this year slowly. And so everyone kind of downgraded him. They questioned his build a little bit, like body type, his desire. But he was still in A ball, right? He was a player that they could have elevated to AA, but they wanted to kind of have it be a slow burn, left him in A. Well, I went and saw him in Tri-Cities a couple of weeks ago, and I saw a player that just didn't want to be there, right? He wanted to move up, and he believed he could move up. Nothing has changed about his ability to hit the ball at all, right, since previous years. And so those who were downgrading him are downgrading him, I think, because they haven't paid enough attention. Right. I don't expect James Anderson to pay close attention to all 400 prospects that he rates, but it does definitely change my perspective on how I see how he rates prospects, because Marte is not any different than he was when he was rated as a top 10 prospect coming into the year. So no, my argument would be that Marte is he's got a much higher offensive ceiling than Arroyo ever will be. Arroyo will stay at short, but Arroyo's not hitting 30 home runs. That's hands down. I'm pretty definitive on that. Stout is a back of the rotation starter. He's 24. He's got decent stuff. He's an innings eater, if anything else. I think he's a little bit on the shorter side, but he falls in that Brandon Williamson category, who the Mariners traded in the trade for Winker and Suarez. I think he's the back of the rotation type of guy. If they hit on one of the two, that's great. And Andrew Moore was up to 100 plus on his fastball, great slider, but he's a reliever. So really, this trade was about Marte and Arroyo. I'm excited for the Mariners. I think if you have Castillo, Ray, Gilbert, Kirby headed into a playoff series, I think you're looking at something good, right? And if you're expecting someone, expecting Julio to kind of carry you offensively, but as a Mariners fan, I was ecstatic. I love the trade. I'm loath to see Marte go, but if it's for Luis Castillo, let's go. Let's do this. Then the other big pitching trade is Frankie Montas and Lee Trevino. Lou Trevino to the Red Sox, or to the Yankees, for Ken Waldichuk, Luis Medina, and two other players. Waldichuk is really the headliner there. What do you think of that trade, and what do you do with Montas's value?
I think Montas's value has to go up, without a doubt. I mean, going to one of the worst teams to one of the best teams. He has had a little bit of a shoulder issue this year, and that would be a concern of mine if I owned him in fantasy, rostered him in fantasy. But I mean, he's in a select group of people that have both plus stuff and plus location. He has legitimate outputs, and his splitter is a really, really good breaking pitch. And I think if he was 100% healthy, he might have been closer. I would certainly value Castillo personally over him, but I think his concerns this year with his shoulder may have driven down his value a little bit. But yeah, I think with that stuff and location and on that team, I think his value is definitely up.
How do you value the change in Parks and the change in offense behind him?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a downgrade in Park, but I think the run support element and the bullpen behind him is far out to me as a fantasy owner would far outweigh the ballpark factor.
Yeah, it's going to be. I'm looking at expected home runs based on Park. So he's given up 12 home runs thus far. And if they were all in Yankee Stadium, he would have given up 14. So it's not that big of a difference from a home run perspective. He's also getting, I don't know a ton about, Elvis Andrus and Tony Kemp and some of the others who play in the infield for the A's, but I do know that that IKF has played a really great shortstop for the Yankees. And and Gleyber Torres, I don't know if he's plus at second, but he's a hell of a lot better than he was at short. So yeah, that offense and bullpen behind him is going to certainly increase his value quite a bit. And then, Waldichuk is a middle of the rotation type of starter. I think he's very, very much fits that A's profile as far as what they look for in trades, right? They're looking for volume. They're looking for middle of the rotation type of guys, and that makes sense. The wild card is Trevino. Do you think Trevino has any sort of holds or save value with the Yankees?
I just want to see how their leverage ladder kind of gets sorted out. They added so many pieces and they've made so many changes. I mean, they also traded away Jordan Montgomery and then they designated Clark Schmidt and then they moved Severino to the 60-day IL. And so, yeah, I'm looking at the Yankees. So, they brought in Trevino. I thought they brought in someone else.
Scott Efros.
Scott Efros, yes, thank you, from the Cubs. So they sent Schmidt down. So I'm just not certain. I mean, it certainly would seem that there was room for him, in a seventh or eighth inning hold type role. But I'm really not sure if, with the way Clay Helms is struggling, if they're going to elevate Chapman and he's going to move back.
Right.
They seem to like Peralta and Marinaccio. And then Loaisiga, I can't quite tell if he's turning the corner or not. And then, you throw Efros into the mix. I'm just kind of honestly confused.
I think saves wise, it's a little bit, it's going to saves wise.
I'd want to wait and see.
Sorry, you paused there.
It's all good.
Yeah, saves wise, I don't know. Like I said before, I would expect it to be Holmes, and then if he continues to falter, you may see Chapman move back in just because of history. I don't know about Trevino. I think Trevino's been up and down. If they can fix him, he'll be pretty dominant, but I see him more as seventh and eighth inning. Real quickly, I know we're running out of time. The Montgomery for Harrison Bader trade just was so out of left field for me. I was stunned. I did not expect that one bit. What was your take?
I mean, I would share that. I was shocked. I mean, we talked a little bit about during the SP rankings episode how sort of quietly Montgomery has really posted better swing and miss numbers, better chase rates than he ever has.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a really quality middle of the rotation guy for them. And like we just highlighted with their injuries, Severino being hurt, I was just shocked to see them trade those innings away and trade that quality arm away for what looks like a redundancy. I mean, yes, I appreciate that they're prioritizing defense more than they have in the past. But right now, the outfielder, he's in a walking boot. He has plantar fasciitis. So that's a pretty serious injury, and it's a really painful injury for a player that relies on speed. I just don't know how much they're going to get out of him this year. And are they just wanting him as a late game defensive replacement, or is he actually going to supplant Aaron Hicks out in the outfield? Like, I don't know.
Right.
I was really, really surprised to see it again, especially with the moving Severino to the 60-day and demoting Clark Schmidt. I was like, where where's your rotation? Where's your fourth and fifth starters?
I guess
Is it,
so. I
they
guess
seem
right
really
now
thin.
it's Cole, Cortez, Herman, Tyone, and Montas, and they must have some sort of confidence in some of the guys they have in the minors. They might assume that Schmidt could potentially move into one of those spots if need be. But yeah, I think they're playing with fire a little bit in dealing Montgomery. If it was me, I would have thought about maybe moving Herman into some sort of bulk innings role or just kind of stashing him. I think they're playing with fire a bit. As far as Bader goes, you know, I think they've seen some returns on prioritizing defense with Donaldson and IKF on the infield. And I think that was a part of the motive in picking up Benintendi, is to give them a good corner outfielder. And so, it might be a defensive replacement sort of thing where Bader comes in the seventh and they move Judge to right and Benintendi to left. But it's pretty high price to pay for a piece that's not necessarily going to be a regular. Would I play him over Hicks? Probably, if it was me, but it doesn't mean that I wouldn't give up a middle of the rotation starter to get that piece.
Yeah, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me.
It was pretty puzzling. I guess some of the other acquisitions, seeing Gallo go to the Dodgers was, it makes everyone think, oh shit, what are the Dodgers are they gonna figure out Gallo, and now they have another huge piece for their offense. But I think that was really just a roll of the dice on the Dodgers part. Mancini to the Astros, Mancini doesn't move the needle for me necessarily. I think he's probably an upgrade over Gurriel, but not by much, probably incremental upgrade. Were you surprised to see the Cardinals not do more than get Montgomery and Quintana? Because they had been rumored for Castillo and Montas.
I wasn't. I think that it's pretty much on brand for them. I wasn't surprised by what they did or what they didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, I think Mancini is looked at because of his surface stats as having a down year. But I think he's been impacted was impacted pretty significantly by the dimensions in Baltimore, being a right-handed for spaced outfielder. If you look at his barrel rates, his launch angle, his velocity, his strikeout and walk rates, all of them are right in line with his career.
Mm-hmm.
He's just not getting the results. And so if they're legitimately going to give him an opportunity to play over Gurriel, which I wonder, with that short perch and right and the box seats there in Houston, I don't know. I think he might be. It all depends on playing time. I'd want to wait and see, but
Right.
that was one when I looked at him, what he's doing from a quality of contact perspective and why he's having a down year. I was surprised to see he's doing what he's always done. He's just not getting the results. And again, that's a pretty friendly ballpark for right-handed power. And I'm really curious to see how they utilize him. But probably nothing to see. But if he got hot in the second half for that team, it might be quite valuable. But I think it's a flip of the coin.
Here's a crazy stat for you.
I mean, Gurriel's.
So
Go ahead.
Savant, he has 10 homers this year, right? According to Baseball Savant, if they were all hit in Houston, he'd have 21 homers.
See, yeah.
So to your point, he's probably just flying out deep to left and left center over and over again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I've never been a huge believer in Mancini. He's not he's slightly above average in exit velocity and hard hit percentage and barrel rate, right? He's in the 60s, which is what you would expect. I think he's a good, not great player. But all his hits to the outfield have all been to left and left center. So he's pretty much a pull hitter. Yeah, I think it's the right choice for them and for the Astros. And I think he could potentially certainly be an upgrade for the Astros. The only other trade that I have here that I think is worth mentioning, two trades worth mentioning fantasy-wise, are the Twins, who acquired Taylor Malley from the Reds for Christian Encarnacion Strand and Spencer Steer, and they acquired Jorge Lopez as well from the Orioles as their closer. how do you feel about those two, both fantasy and real life?
I guess I will start with Jorge Lopez. I think it's funny that people think that the Twins and Baldelli are going to change and all of a sudden they're going to have a closer now. That's not what they do. Just because they traded for Lopez, I've heard a lot of speculation like, oh, he's the closer. I don't think that's the case. I think he'll close. He'll get plenty of opportunities to close. I'm not saying he won't be a closer, but that's just not what they do. And they've said that and they've shown you that's not what they do. So I think that's kind of funny when people just, I think, wish cast, to use a word that we've thrown around today quite a bit. So yeah, but I mean, Lopez is having a great year. I mean, he's a failed starter, but I think what's interesting to me about both he and the pitcher who was left behind, and we'll pick up maybe some closing opportunities in Baltimore, Bautista, is I think Baltimore is starting to get a little bit of cred when it comes to pitching.
Sure.
You look what they're doing with Austin Voth and getting by with him, and he was terrible with Washington, and they've made him at least a serviceable starter. Yeah, it just seems to me that they're starting to put together some things pitching wise that, they're taking guys who are other teams' cast-offs and turning them into valuable pieces. Again, Jorge Lopez was a starter last year and they've turned him into a pretty darn good high leverage arm. So that's something I'll be paying attention to and going forward is, who is in the Baltimore bullpen, who is in their starting rotation, who has skills maybe that they can get something out of. I'm looking for Tyler Mahle. So, I mean, he's right above league average. Obviously, it's a huge change in ballpark on the plus side, and I think also the Central going from the National League Central to the American League Central. It's another soft landing spot,
Right.
In terms of quality of opponent. So, I think to me his stock would be up. He was, if you look at his home road splits, they're pretty markedly different. And so I think he's more like a 3.7 ERA away from Cincinnati for his career.
Yep.
So I would look for him to be closer to that. I mean, he's not that frontline starter. I still worry about the Twins when they get into, the playoffs. Are they going to have enough starting rotation, muscle to really advance? But I think for fantasy this year, if I was a Mahle owner, I would be encouraged and consider his stock to be up.
Yeah, I'm glad the approach that they have of just compiling a rotation of all kind of middle rotation starters is one that I'm glad my team doesn't do. It would be pretty maddening to me because I don't know that approach wins in the playoffs, to your point.
Right.
I do think as an organization, their desire is to just make the playoffs. I don't think that they are if you really ask the ownership group, right, are you trying to win a championship? Are you willing to sacrifice, or are you doing this to try to make some money and make the playoffs and have the Twins be the lovable Twins? I think it's the latter. But and so I don't, the Mahle trade I think is a good baseball trade for them. It's smart. But I don't know that it's going to move the needle for them as far as making them into a contender. It makes them better. It doesn't make them a contender.
Yeah.
And then, with regards to their bullpen, I think that they signed Alex Colomé last year to be their closer. And I think that it's hard unless a team comes out and very blatantly says, this is what we're doing. I think it's hard to determine whether a team's going to go with a definitive closer or not, right? You look at Philadelphia right now, as we spoke of, and they signed Knebel with the intention on making him the closer, and he hasn't necessarily worked out. So they're trying to figure out what they want to do. And so I think it can be malleable at times. So, if I'm Minnesota, would I give up what I gave up to acquire Lopez and make him just a kind of a mix and match type of reliever? I don't know, because I don't know if that makes the difference in making the playoffs or not. I think that's another wait and see. I'm on the fence with that one, but it's cool to see Minnesota make moves. I don't know if those moves would make me excited as a fan, but it's cool to see them actually make some moves. Is there anything else? They also acquired Fulmer from the
Yeah,
Tigers
from
as
the
well.
Tigers.
So they
He
made a couple
struggled
moves
late.
to
He
help.
struggled late, but Henches just wore him out. They were
Still a
running him
good
out
arm.
there all the time, and
Yep.
he was lucky he's not hurt.
Right. The last one I guess we have is Wilson Contreras and Ian Happ stayed with the Cubs. Um, I'll say, having lived in Chicago and friends with lots of Cubs fans, and there when Contreras was kind of, in some of his earlier years, I expected him to be traded. In hindsight, the fact that they didn't trade him, I think, is kind of cool. I know they really broke the hearts of a lot of fans and a lot of kids by trading Rizzo, Bryant, and Baez, and letting Baez go. Um, and Contreras, it was a hug fest, right? We saw him
Yeah,
essentially hug people goodbye, expecting to be traded, and I'm sure he had some say in whether he was traded or not. As far as, not that he could influence the Cubs to not trade him, but he would probably said, "Look, I'm." My guess is he said, "I'm willing to resign if you keep me here." Um, it would not surprise me if they had some sort of agreement potentially in place for him to stay in Chicago. But I was surprised by that. I think he could have certainly helped a contender, but it was kind of a cool, sentimental thing to see him stay in Chicago. How about
yeah.
you?
It certainly, I mean, obviously we're not in the rooms, but just from the reporting, it seems like their asking price was quite high and they weren't going to concede. And if no one met it, they were more than happy to keep him.
Right. Any other trades you want to talk about? Anything else of interest?
Um, no, I mean, Whit Merrifield going to the Blue Jays, I mean, I'm not can say it's really of interest for me, but I think it is something that's impactful for fantasy. I mean, him going from Kansas City to Toronto. I was checking to see the lineup today where they're batting him. If he's even in the lineup, I'm not sure if he can play yet. Yeah, he's not in the lineup today. It'd be interesting to see. I assume he plays second base and pushes Espinal to the bench. Yeah, I'd be interested to see for fantasy where he bats in the lineup. How much do they let him run? The Blue Jays haven't ran this much because kind of to your point of view made about Iglesias. If you're relying on someone for a category and you can change his teams and you lose that category. So I'll be interested to see, does he have the green light? Where does he bat?
Right.
If I don't own him anywhere because I wasn't high on him, not high on his particular skill set, but if I did, I would be asking those questions and gauging his value based on that.
Right.
Um, I don't think I have really anything else. You've hit everything. Our guy Pham went to the Red Sox. He's been batting second, which is pretty cool. Even with Devers back and Bogarts in the lineup today, he was still batting second today.
Yep.
So that's kind of fun to see. Hopefully he'll continue to do Tommy Pham things. I love watching him play. You mentioned in passing the Gallo in, and people might be scared. I looked at her depth chart and I studied it left and right. I can't see where he fits in. To me, he's a redundancy with Bellinger, the same type of player. Um, and then if you want to put him in left, well, Chris Taylor's coming back. So are you going to platoon Chris Taylor? I mean, I know you're not a fan of Chris Taylor, but the Dodgers like him. They just brought up Vargas to play third, but Muncy's playing every day at third. So then you got Justin Turner coming back, and then so Muncy or Turner's going to DH, so that spot will be gone. I just don't see how it fits. I will say their bench is pretty right-handed, so is it going to be a left-handed bench bat? It was just hard to see where it fits in. But
I
I
think
mean, he does
he
have talent, and he does need a change of scenery. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I thought Pujols was done, and Pujols went there and showed signs of life. So,
right.
you get him around Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman and Clayton Kershaw, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I think his even outwardly, some of the things that he posted, I think he was so broken because of the way New York is kind of, the way the fans treated him and the way they weren't patient with him, that the Dodgers may simply think, okay, there's talent there, let's just change of scenery might do something. The other thing is, if he hits fastballs, right? So in 21, 26 of his home runs came off the fastball. 12 came off of other pitches, and he saw fastballs 55.5% of the time. So he hit home runs off of fastballs, right? He hit 235 and with the 574 slug off the fastball in 21. So if you're the Dodgers, this is my thinking. If you're the Dodgers and you're going against a pitcher that throws, a high percentage of right-handed pitcher that throws a high percentage of fastballs, he would be my guy to start, potentially in left field. He can certainly give someone a break if you wanted to give Bellinger a break or someone like that. He also can play all three outfield spots. So yes, I think ultimately he's probably a bench player. Mariners just went up 4-0 on the Yankees. Suarez hit a 3-run homer off of Cole, and then Carlos Santana just hit a solo shot off of Cole. No outs, 4-0 Mariners. Obviously the Dodgers probably see something that we don't see, but just for me bringing up how he fares against different pitches, in my mind, I think, hey, if you're facing a 60% fastball guy, right-handed starter, let's play Gallo in one of the corners. Let's DH Gallo. Let's see what happens. And they're certainly going to tweak him. So change the scenery, get him off the East Coast, get him out of New York, let him breathe a little bit, try to tweak his swing or approach maybe slightly, and play him against pitchers that he faces, that he matches up well with. I think it's a worthy gamble. It wouldn't surprise me to see him get back to being a pretty, not dominant player, but that he was, but an above average hitter for sure. Let's see here. I don't really have anything else. It was a fun deadline. It was an exciting deadline. It's funny because I heard,
some quick question on Gallo, and then
go ahead.
So if he's not a free agent, but if he was, would you grab him and stick him on your bench?
As on fantasy wise?
Yeah.
Depends on the makeup of my team. I think if I needed an outfielder or a first base option, and I was looking for OPS, I think I might take a shot at him. If I was willing to mix and match a little bit with my lineup, I would. I wouldn't prioritize it necessarily, but I think he, you look at what Schwarber's done this year, right? Not the same profile, but that similar sort of low average, high OBP, lots of power sort of approach. And Schwarber's provided tremendous value. So I think he's worth a wild card. What I would do for sure. So I'm speaking from the perspective of a contender. I'll tell you what, if I'm not making the playoffs, like in our league, if I was one of those 7 teams if I was one of the 9 teams that's not in contention, 100%, I'd be trading for Gallo right now. I'd be trading for Gallo, and I would be waiting to see what happens to him at the end of the season in the offseason. He's a potential good keeper. If you're keeping 15, I would buy him just because he went to the Dodgers for sure.
Yeah, I checked. He's not available in our TGFBI league or our leagues.
Right. What would you do in our league? Would you consider picking him up or trading for him?
I mean, transparency, I went to see if he was available because I was going to maybe stash him on the bench.
Sure.
So, I mean, it says a lot about his talent, I think, to me, that you're still on the dream on it. And I think the Dodgers is a special situation because of leadership and organizational structure.
Right. Well, and I think, yes, is there attention on the Dodgers? Absolutely. But I think that being in LA, being in California, I wouldn't say that the players on that team are laid back, because they're not. You don't get to that place by being laid back. But my perspective as an outsider, the amount of tension in the stadium, the amount of pressure on the players, the way that the fans and the media approach the players, it's just different. Right. And Gallo grew up in Vegas. And so I do think that the change of scenery alone could be enough. But the fact that that the organization is so different, I think will also have an impact. I would buy. I don't know that I would give up too much for him, because I still think it's a lottery ticket, but I would buy for sure.
A few cards before we go.
Yeah. Do you have an open forum question, or are we going to skip open forum this week?
Let's just do cards and wrap it up.
Cool. Sounds good. Go ahead.
All right. We're just talking Astros outfield, Chas McCormick.
Okay.
I think the second time we've gotten this card. Ditch the leg kick, Christian Yelich.
Nice.
Our guy, Kyle Schwarber. That's a nice looking card.
Cool. Awesome.
This is another Topps opening day set, by the way. Not exciting. Justin Verlander. I'm spoiler. Nico Horner. Then the next card.
Verlander.
The ace of our staff and TGFBI.
Yep.
And then Brandon Woodruff.
The previously rostered Brandon Woodruff.
Previously rostered.
We'll see what happens to him the rest of the year. Cool, man. You got anything else?
Nope. Feel better.
It's good to see you, brother. All right.
Bye. Be well.
You too.